All right, I'm going to do a little video right now where I talk a little bit about spiritual experience and my own spiritual experience. Let's start with a great question, one of the great questions, which is, what would I be without my story? And it's a great question because our story generally is, we tend to get attached, right, to our own story, and we think we're special. That was a very big thing for me, I will say. It is my own specialness, and we get into our special pain of I am special in my suffering, and we also get into the I am special in my spiritual awareness and my spiritual enlightenment. And it runs the gamut, and it covers a full spectrum. So I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with that, because some people would say, well, don't focus so much on your own story. Now, I would say that that's true. There are ways in which we can focus in an unhealthy way on our own story, and there are ways that we can use our own story to help others, to show that whatever they're experiencing or have experienced, it's not too different than what I have or what someone else has experienced. And I will say a basic, if you want to cut to the chase with most people that get onto a spiritual path, basically, there was a point in their life where they had some kind of trauma or some kind of, it could have been a traumatic experience, but it also could have been an awakening experience. And sometimes it's both at the same time. You have a traumatic experience that leads to an awakening at that very moment. and then they go seeking after that because you're like, wow, what happened there? And I need to find out what that was. And so you start to look around you. You start to look into things and start to read. And my own experience happened before the internet, before the age of the personal computer, really, right around that time. I'll lead up to that. My first major experience, I would say, was 1989. I was 19 years old. Leading up to that, some of the most important things that happened to me was, I grew up in a suburban home, upper middle class. We were fairly well off. 4 boys. I was the youngest, and the traumatic thing that happened, and it happened right on the cusp of puberty for me, the age of 11. My parents separated. And that was a very big thing at that moment, very traumatic for my whole family, but I took it very hard as well. And my teen years, as a result, were definitely very colored by that whole event. And that went on my whole teenage, into my 20s, and beyond. These kinds of things affect you your whole life. But that was a very big thing for me, and a lot of things came up. And then I also hit puberty, and hitting puberty for me was very traumatic in itself. And I felt all of a sudden I went from being this young child, basically, that was adored by many, to being like this geeky, awkward kid, lanky, awkward, geeky kid, with acne, and it was a tough moment in a lot of ways, and it brought up a lot of questions. It brought up a lot of, it was kind of an awakening in and of itself, right? Awakening to, oh wow, this is, this is kind of crazy how my life shifted like that so suddenly. Now, I'm not going into all the gory details, but I wish I could, but there's not, we're talking about whole libraries of books that could be written about these kinds of things, right? But anyway, to make a very long story short, my teenage years were I was really on the verge of psychosis, and people even called me psycho. They usually call me that behind my back. I hardly ever heard it, but people were talking about me. So I knew that I was. I knew there was definitely something unusual. I think it was just that I took it all very hard, and I was super sensitive. So the one thing that was helping me as a teenager was running. That was like my religion. That was like my salvation. I did not have religion at that point. I did not have a spiritual understanding as I do now, but I did have a lot of questions, and I was reading a lot, and I got into philosophy, and I majored in philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania. First I went to Bucknell. I was a pre-med at Bucknell, and then I transferred to University of Pennsylvania. I actually had an experience at Bucknell where I was where these guys on the cross country team tried to convert me, and I did convert to Christianity. I'm Jewish by birth, but I did it kind of reluctantly and under pressure and under a kind of a fire and brimstone message that was given to me, and the whole thing was kind of a mess. I did not feel Jesus. I did not have an experience of Jesus at that moment. At least I was 17 years old, turning 18. A couple of years later, or a year and a half later, in the summer, I was reading. I've been studying philosophy for about a year. I got into psychology, especially had a fascination all of a sudden with Freud and Jung, especially with Jung, but both Freud and Jung I thought was fascinating. I wrote a paper about Jung, not Freud, and I was really getting into reading all as much of Jung as I could. Like I was reading Modern Man in Search of a Soul, I believe it's called. And this was in the summer of '89, and one night I was thinking about my friend, a friend who I knew since right around the time my parents separated when I was 11, just around that age, and it was clear that she had a thing for me, but I wasn't interested in her. But as we got older, and I didn't really hang out with her very much, I didn't even know her that well. But I was 19, all of a sudden I really started to think about her. And she became a symbol for me at that moment for like purity and compassion and like motherly acceptance. And I was thinking about that one night, laying in bed, and I felt this energy rise up. It was very sudden, come up to my heart, and my heart was open. I was in bliss. And it was the best feeling ever. It was it was like being home again, but still in my body. And the next morning I woke up and it was still there, and all of a sudden the world was transformed. Not just my own consciousness, but everything. I had no neurotic patterns and nothing actually at all. It was all gone. Everything was just gone, and I was in my natural state, in my body. And you could say, well, yeah, okay, you fell in love. Great. Many people, falling in love is very common, right? Yeah, but let's not put down what that is, because that's when you're in it, it's the most important thing in the world, and nothing else matters. And I would still say that nothing else matters, right? Other than being in love. because that's, everything else is how to get to that. So it came to me unbidden. Like, I was not seeking it. I was not practicing anything except reading and thinking, and on some level seeking unconsciously. I was like, had a lot of issues, issues around sexuality, around masturbation, around all sorts of things that were troubling me, pressures and stress, and so yes, there was a lot that led up to that, and then once it happened, the next few months, I was riding that I was riding that wave, and I was just free, and somehow I thought that the woman that I was thinking about, my friend, that we were meant to be together, and that this was meant that we were meant to be partners. And she was at a different school. She was at Yale. I was at Penn. I was writing to her, thinking about her, writing songs for her, all kinds of things. And at one point I called her. I managed to call her. I didn't have many conversations with her, but she was like, this is not about me. This is about you. And I didn't really understand, and I took that as we're not meant to be together, right? But she was right. She was absolutely right. That what happened there, as I know now, and as most of us as we get older, we understand, is that I did not fall in love with her per se. I fell in love with what she symbolized for me. And in a sense, I fell in love with love itself. And so at that point, I did not understand all those things so well. And so when she said no, that was the end. Suddenly it was over for me. It all fizzled, and I was back. I was back in my ego once again. Now, the only difference was, and the problems came back. The same issues came back once again. But the only difference was I had now had this experience. So I became a seeker, because having had that experience, I needed to find out how to get that back. If it was possible to get that back, what happened to me? What was that all about? Do other people have the same thing that happened to me? Because it felt like I was special, at that moment, like no one else has this, somehow I am special. I am chosen, which is not true, but that's on some level that is true to a certain extent, but because it is a kind of a rare thing in this world, but it also was egoic, to think that I'm special in this. No, this is available really to everyone. Maybe it was a little bit unique that it happened so spontaneously with me, and it was very much like it was kind of just like going back to my true self, and feeling like, oh yes, I remember now. This is what I really am, and all the other stuff were layers upon that were covering, that were hiding the light, hiding what I truly am. So I began to look around. I began to do some seeking, some searching. Eventually, it took me. I went to Israel. I studied religion. I actually became an Orthodox Jew, and then I realized that would be limiting, and that did not fully address what I had experienced, and I needed to find what would address what I had experienced. So ultimately, I got into mysticism, and I got into yoga, which to me was the closest thing that I had found. And then later I got into plant medicine, and ayahuasca became the next thing for me. This is all like 10 years, like 26 yoga, 36 ayahuasca, plant medicine, 46, maybe 43, 42, I got into A Course in Miracles. So they were kind of like 10 years, all 10 years apart. Yoga was 10 years, I'm sorry, running was first, right? And then yoga, and then plant medicine, and then A Course in Miracles. I wonder what's going to happen, in this decade of my life. But so far, I'm still with A Course in Miracles. It's the thing that's helping me the most, but I'm also utilizing the other things as well. So what did I want to say? Well, I think that there's natural awakenings and there are rude awakenings that you might have on the path. Some people get rude awakenings, but they lead to a more natural, to get back to your natural state. My awakening was more of a natural awakening. It just happened spontaneously, like I said. But it wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. And I think that's what I didn't fully understand. And I wondered, is there a way to get back to that experience so that it stays? And I would say A Course in Miracles is presenting a way to get back to the place where you're in your body, but you are living in your as close to your true self as you possibly can, right? You're living in a state of ever-present love and compassion and forgiveness. And that's what I would, that's why I'm so much into A Course in Miracles, and why I find it so helpful, and why I find it so useful. And it's really, A Course in Miracles is really the natural way, because it's just about changing our mind. And everything will change when we change our minds. So I would say that the experience I had of falling in love when I was 19 was really what the Course is bringing us to, is that same state of being in love. You're in the world, but not of the world, because the love of which we speak is really not available so much in this world. But you can experience it even while you're here, and you can even be established in that more and more, and you can be more and more constant and in that ever-present state of love, presence, loving presence, let's say. So anyway, that's my little talk about this. There's so much I could say about it, but I've already done a video, but it's worth sharing about it more and talking about it more. I would love, if you have any thoughts or questions or anything like that, please let me know. And yeah, check out, if you're interested, check out, I've been doing this whole Course in Miracles series. I've read through the whole text and some the supplements, and reading through the workbook, commenting on it, talking about it. So check it out if you're interested. Thanks so much for listening, and see you soon. Bye-bye.